Recording in progress.
Good evening. Today we're going to discuss about the morning service of the Orthodox Church that is called Matins or Orthros. And the Orthros needs its own treatment, its own lesson, because it's probably the most complicated service that we have. And it is also a combination of several ancient services. So I don't want to rush this. So we're going to do it in two parts. Today we're going to talk about part one. And next week we're going to talk about the final part of this beautiful service. Um, so if you look at the daily services, if you look at the morning hours and the night hours, the Orthros, the Matins, is an evening service, right? It starts somewhere around um, around the ninth hour of the night and goes all the way until sunrise. It's a beautiful effect to see the sun rising as we sing the doxology to the Son of God arising from the east. Uh, and so uh, the Byzantines knew very well how to arrange this timing so it will have the greatest of effects. I remember being at the monastery of Vatopedi, one of the small chapels, and we served the liturgy there after the matins was in the great Catholic or in the great church of the monastery. Then we went to the small chapel for divine liturgy, and I remember vividly as they opened the holy doors, how the sun was coming like a beam. You can almost hang your coat on that beam, as one of the stories say, and filled the whole room with a beautiful morning color. So it has a special effect to have this before the sunrise and end it around sunrise. The word matins comes from Latin word that means morning. So the matins is a morning service or a service that ends towards the morning, towards the sunrise. So the Orthros, as I mentioned, is a synthesis. Is a synthesis, a combination between two things: the monastic tradition from the monastery of St. Savas in Palestine, and also urban monasticism from Constantinople and the Studite monastery that was very close to the main city that at that point was the capital of the empire. And the monastic tradition included psalms and readings because it was made for the monastics. It was by definition a service where people wanted to interiorize themselves, to draw within their heart and bring their mind into the heart. So the services were more subdued, more readings, a lot of Jesus prayer probably said in their minds during those services there. On the other hand, contrasting with that, we have the cathedral rites from Constantinople and Jerusalem. They were for urban Christians, people that lived in cities, people that had jobs, people that that enjoyed music more, and so a lot of the matins was chanted, and they also had a lot of processions through the city where the emperor and other noblemen and hierarchy was participating. So it was a more lively service. So Orthros eventually, as monastic typica, the rules of the services that were developed in monasteries and those developed in the city, started to merge as Constantinople was becoming the center of Christianity after Constantine. So that's why the service of Orthodox is so complicated, because it's a combination of two or even more than that traditions. You can see here, that's the Holy Sepulchre here in Jerusalem, the cathedral there, and the cathedral of Constantinople, Hagia Sophia, which was built by Justinian. And then you have Antioch, who also influenced through personalities like St. John Chrysostom, for instance, influenced the typicon and the liturgical services in the great city, but also the monasteries of St. Sava in Palestine, for instance, influenced Jerusalem Cathedral, which in turn influenced Hagia Sophia. So it's a combination of all these things that slowly, because they didn't have internet or any other means of fast communication. Slowly, as Constantinople was unifying the Byzantine Empire, or the Roman Empire, they never called it Byzantine. This is a later term invented in the West. They were Romans. As Byzantium, Constantinople became the center of the empire, and the whole empire became Christian. So at that point, it was a need for a unification, if you want, of the way the services were conducted. So why is this important? Why is it important to know where the services come from? Isn't it enough to just learn the way they are? Isn't that complicated enough? So I think that understanding the origins of something reveals the meaning and the purpose. For instance, the parts that are read, the parts that are more subdued, we know that these come from a monastic tradition that leads more to going into the heart, right? Going inside ourselves rather than manifesting ourselves on the outside. While others, like the antiphonal singing of psalms, like the Polyeleos, when we also swing the chandeliers and so forth, they will have more of a lively attitude that, in a way, wakes up our conscience for the service and the theology of the services that we are conducting. If you want to look at the two rites, the monastic or the cathedral, here's a slide that shows, for instance, some differences. In the monastic tradition, the Psalter, for instance, was central, the reading of the Psalms. So you have 150 Psalms, each one divided, the 160 Psalms, they are divided in 20 kathismata, 20 parts, and each of them in 3 stasis. So you're going to have 60 stasis in total there. And they are read in numerical order from 1 to 20. There are no refrains as you read those, just plain text. And the entire Psalter is read once a week in a monastery. During Lent is actually read twice. In the cathedral on the side, there were fewer psalms used in Orthodox, for instance, because some of the other psalms were assigned to other services. So they had 140 psalms, and whatever other psalms they were assigned to daily offices, they were not repeated. They had refrains like Alleluia, have mercy on me, O Lord, and so forth. And the singing was antiphonal, with 2 choirs giving responses with a refrain in between there. That's at the level of the Psalter. Also, the weekly cycle in the monasteries, the octohijos, the 8-week cycle of the eight modes, was changing every week, and yet there is a complete set of daily services arranged around those eight modes. In the cathedral, yes, the 8 modes was followed, but the octohijos itself, like the daily services and so forth, were mostly ignored. There were 2 choirs, and so there was a 2-week cycle based on the rotation of those choirs, and did not include all the other daily services that are done in the monasteries, like compline hours, midnight service, and so forth. Usually have the evening service, vespers, and morning services that we call today Orthodox. So some of these elements here, like the kathismata, the reading of the psalters and the antiphons, they contrast with each other because of their content and their form, which was meant for a different purpose. One for monastics who look into themselves, and other for cathedral, which was more of an expression of faith that we're going towards the entire world. So what is the structure of Orthodox? Well, we have, first of all, something that is called the Emperor's Office. That was done, the first part of Matins that was done in the presence of the emperor there. And then we have the monastic midnight office, and then to that was added the cathedral vigil office and the cathedral matins office to it. So that's the basic the basic structure there. Hello.
Hi, this is Tony calling you from Fazenda Gaucha.
Yes.
I email, but you're interested in making a reservation with us?
Yes.
Yeah, we can accommodate for 90 people.
Okay, that's absolutely great. So how do we do that? You can just make the reservation now. So my name is Vasily Tudora from St. John the Baptist in Ules. So we're very close to you. And looks like, I mean, if everybody comes, we're going to have probably up to 55 people. We are planning to be there around 6 o'clock. Is that okay?
Yeah,
That's great. That's great because we were supposed to go somewhere downtown Fort Worth. That's why it's kind of last minute, but because of the freezing and everything, we want to go to sometime closer. And we've been to a restaurant before and we liked it, so that's why we said, oh, let's go there.
Thank you, Jason. So the only thing that I want to see if I may require a deposit.
Okay.
Let me see how much it would be, and can I send it the form to you, the email address that you sent me?
Yes, vasily.tudor@gmail.com. Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll work on it right now, and I'll send it right away to you. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Good.
Okay. Bye bye. So these are the parts of the Orthros, right? The Emperor's office, the monastic midnight office, the cathedral vigil office, and the cathedral matins office. So all these different components have come together, and that's why they create such a complex and very dynamic service as matins is. It can last somewhere between 45 minutes to a whole night, several hours. Last vigil that I've been in Vatopedi for the feast of the belt, it took about 6 or 7 hours just for the matins part. So you can imagine. All right, so here is the structure of the full Orthros according to the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. Now I want to make a note here. There is not one single typicon. The Orthodox Church in its history has seen many type of typica. Actually, even today, if you go to Mount Athos, they have 20 monasteries. Each one of them is going to have a slightly different typicon. The main components are going to be there, but they're going to be different. So that's why, when you go to a Russian church, they may do certain things a little different, but the majority of things are pretty much the same. What I mentioned here with red, what I drew here with red and with black are the fixed parts. That we have a skeleton, and on that skeleton we add different things according to the feast day, according to the season, and so forth. And so you don't have to remember all of this. I mean, this is something that will put like all the puts here for a festal Orthros, and that is a full Orthros where you have all the kathismata, you have all the canons, odes, and so forth there. But you're going to see that for various reasons, this can be shortened to something that is maybe for a parish more manageable than the full monastic service. So where do we recognize the parts that we just discussed, right? So if you look at the different parts, you can recognize that we have here, for instance, the first part is going to be the midnight office from the monasteries. Then you can have the cathedral morning office and the cathedral vigil, right? The vigil and the morning services. So you can still look at Orthros and recognize the various parts that put together the complexity of this service. So what are the central themes of Orthros? First of all, everything starts with a fall. So at the beginning of Orthros, you're going to see that everything is dark, the lights are not all up, and the curtain is going to be closed. That represents the fall. We fell into darkness, and the doors of paradise have been closed. But after this, God being the Lord, as we start singing the various parts of Orthros after the 6 Psalms, we repent, and Christ comes and becomes incarnate, and he applies on us his divine economy, for which we give praise. So that's kind of the Orthros, his fall, rising in Christ, acknowledging the divine economy, and rejoicing in his salvation. On Sundays, obviously, the focus is going to be on resurrection, because every Sunday we celebrate Pascha, the resurrection of the Lord. But on feast days, we're going to have special hymnography that will refer to the feast of the church. So if you look at matins in the structure of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, we're going to have the Matins Ordinary part that contains the Trisagion, the the Emperor's Office, and the 6 Psalms. And then the rest of it is going to be variable. And we're going to have certain order for Sundays, for feast days, for weekdays, and for Lent. We're not going to go through all of that, but we just want to make sure that you understand which are the big parts so you can start recognizing them. Of course, at the beginning, a lot of terms that you're not going to know. Kathismata, exapostilaria, doxology, praises, eni, all these terms, you don't have to learn them right now. They come from Greek. It's easy to understand what they mean, but what you need to do is actually come to the services and start recognizing those things. And as you start recognizing them, you're going to realize that you don't have to know the content. If you know where you are, you can either follow, if you know on your phone, if you read the service before, I always recommend to read the service before from a digital chant stand. And then when you participate, you know what the service is all about. So at the beginning, maybe you need a little bit more preparation. But I think if you start recognizing those parts, then you are much, much more at ease when you participate in these services. So what is the structure of Matins Ordinary, which repeats pretty much for every service verbatim? First is the office of the Emperor, the 6 Psalms, and the Great Litany. What is the office of the Emperor? This some people call it the royal office, but it's not really accurate because in Byzantium there was no king. It was just an emperor there. So historically, this office was connected with the presence of the emperor who would come to participate in the service. It includes the Trisagion, O Heavenly King, Holy God, Holy Mighty, Most Holy Trinity, and Our Father. And then after that includes the Psalms 19 and 20. Now, in current parish practice, these 2 Psalms are skipped, and they're only done in Holy Week because we don't have any emperor anymore that was supposed to enter at that time. There was a censing, and the emperor would enter, take his seat in the balcony of Hagia Sophia at that point. Since we don't have a king anymore, this kind of fell out of use. However, in Holy Week, we expect the entrance of the King of Glory, right? The bridegroom service with that beautiful icon. The icon of the humility of Christ. We do that because it follows the entrance during God is the Lord, and when we sing the troparia of the bridegroom, Christ actually enters and takes his place in the middle of the church there. After this, we have several troparia related with the cross, and then a thrice litany, and then we give the main blessing for the Orthodox, which says, "Glory to the Holy, Consubstantial, and Undivided Trinity, always now and forever, and to the ages of ages. Amen." And then the rest of the Orthodox continues. What follows afterwards is the Hexapsalm, or the 6 Psalms, which starts with, "Glory in the highest of God, and on earth peace, goodwill among men." We only do this psalm here and at the beginning of the Divine Liturgy, in the preparation of the clergy for the beginning of liturgy. The psalms that are selected are Psalm 3, 37, 62, 87, 102, and 142. They're separated in the middle by some Alleluias and glory to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. The whole idea about this is that in the tradition of the church, these are the psalms that will be read at the final judgment. So, because that's such a solemn moment, imagine that you're in front of the judge of the universe. There's no kneeling, there's no sitting, there's no signing of the cross, there's no even coughing or anything. We're trying to keep a solemn silence. And the priest will come out after he reads some prayers in the altar there, will come in front of the icon of Christ and will read the final prayers. And then the priest will read the great litany in front of the closed holy doors. Why are they closed? Because it represents the prayer of Adam in front of the closed door of paradise. They were closed and were guarded by a cherubim with a fiery sword. So that's the part, the Matins Ordinary, that we have discussed about. So that's a part that repeats in all the services. Is easy to recognize. When you know that the Trisagion begins, when you start reading the Psalms, you know pretty much where we are. After this starts, some of the main parts of the service, like God is the Lord with the troparia, and we're going to follow through with this structure. Now, the full service of Orthodox looks like this, where everything is respected and everything is done. However, this is done mostly in monasteries and maybe in parishes on feast days when you have more chanters participating and so forth there. For brevity and for practicality, most of the time, some of the things like the polyele and the canons are sometimes either abbreviated or they are omitted altogether. A simplified Orthodox will be let's say for a feast day, you can still do the polyeleos, you can do part of the canons, maybe Ode 1 and 3, and then just do some of the main hymns from the canons for the Odes 4 to 8, and then you will do the full canon for the 9th Ode. According to the monastic typicon, for each of the Odes, you have to do about 14 stanzas, so you have to repeat some of the hymns. We're not going to be able to do that in a parish because that takes about 2-3 hours in itself. So a lot of times that's why it is skipped, because it takes a lot of time. And if you only have one chanter that has to sing by himself, for 3 hours, for 2 hours just to do the canon, you can imagine that can be a little taxing on one's voice and energy. In most of the parishes, probably the polyeleos is not done. The canons can be done, and the 9th Ode can be done. Most of the times, and that's the simplest form of Orthodox for feast days, they're going to be no polyeleos. We're just going to read and no reading of the kathismata. We're just going to do what we call the seasonal hymns that are read in between the reading of the kathismata. And then instead of doing the canon, we just do the model hymns for the melodies of the canon, which is called katavasies. Okay, so no polyeleos, no canons, and most of the times we do the 9th Ode or the Magnificat instead. The rest of the Orthodox stays the same. On a Sunday, we usually don't have a polyeleos per se, and we're not doing the readings from the kathismata. So that's kind of the structure of a Mass. You have God is the Lord, followed by the Apolitikia, the shorter hymns that we have for the saints, a small litany, the seasonal hymns according to the mode of the week. Then we have the Resurrection of Logitaria, small litany, antiphons, Prokimenon, Katavasias, Resurrection Gospel, Psalm 50, and then after that, Ex Apostolaria, Lauds, and Doxology, and the litanies are usually said quietly in the altar as we finish the chanting of the Doxology. So that's what you're going to see in most of the Sundays. But again, this is still a complicated structure, and I don't think that you can remember it from the very beginning. It needs a lot of practice. Even for chanters, it's difficult sometimes. So if you can remember this slide, I think this will be enough for you to know where you are. So you know that we have the introduction, right, with the Emperor's Office. Then we have the reading of the 6 Psalms. Then God is the Lord with the Troparia. Then we have the seasonal hymns, the Kathismata from the Psalter. Then Gospel and Katavasias, the singing of the more honorable than the cherubim, Ex Apostolaria, the praises, and the Doxology. These are the parts that will constitute an Orthodox for any given Sunday. Okay, so if you remember, you can remember these parts and you start identifying them. Then I think you will be golden there. So now we're going to get a little bit into the minutia and the details of the various parts of Orthodox. So let's talk a little bit about the first part after Matins Ordinary. God is the Lord with the Apolitikia and the small litany. What is God is the Lord? Basically, we have Psalm 117, verses 110 and 23, with the refrain, God is the Lord and has appeared himself to us. has shown himself to us. That also comes from Psalm 117. After that, we're going to sing the same hymns that we sang during Vespers, which are, if you remember, each of the saint has an apolitikion, right? Which means that is sung at the end of the service, which on Vespers it is the case. So whatever we sing at the end of Vespers as hymns for whatever feast or saint we're celebrating that day, or resurrection, or whatever it is, the same are repeated after God is the Lord at the beginning of the Orthros, right? So we're going to sing God is the Lord and he reveals himself to us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And this is going to be sung in the tone or mode of the week, or if it is a feast day, we're going to sing it in the mode of the first apolitikion, right? So it will go like, God is the Lord and he revealed himself to us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for his good, his mercy endures forever. God is the Lord and he revealed himself to us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Of course, this is in a soft chromatic fourth mode, but it will be sung in any other mode that is appropriate for that particular Sunday. So this is, remember, after the fall, after reading the great petition in front of the closed doors, now God is still the Lord, right? And he revealed himself to us, right? So he showed himself throughout the history of humanity in the Old Testament, and now he comes to show us his mercy that endures forever to all the nations, and all of this is wonderful in our eyes. So it's kind of the beginning of the work of salvation of the divine economy. We talk about the apolitikia. All right. Always remember, as we discussed in Vespers, the last apolitikion, they can be two or they can be three, and in between them we have glory to the Father and to the Son and Holy Spirit, but now and ever into the ages of ages. Amen. The last one is always dedicated to the Theotokos, right? To underline the importance of her role in our salvation. After Christ, she is the first of humanity that allow us to have access to Christ. After this, we start with the next part, which includes the reading of the Psalter, the Polyeleos, and then and then all the other things. This is again the full Orthros. The Kathismata are basically full groups of psalms read. So the first Kathisma and the second Kathisma are read there in plain reading, and each of them is followed by a small litany and appropriate seasonal hymns according to the Typicon are chanted. As I mentioned, throughout all the services of 1 week, a whole Psalter is read and twice during great length. Kathisma number 3 is a vestige from the Cathedral Vigil office, and it contains antiphonal singing with refrains. Okay, so what's going to have? It's going to have, for instance, one of the Psalms, like 134 or Psalm 135, which will include themes like the mercy of the Lord endures forever. And that will be repeated as a refrain there. And during this time, the central chandelier with a horos that surrounds it are swung, and they create a beautiful motion that represents the whole creation that is rejoicing at the glory of God. The word polyeleos represents a play of words between a lot of oil and a lot of mercy. Elion is oil and eleos is mercy. So a lot of mercy and a lot of oil at that point, because all the lights in the old chandeliers were done with oil lamps. Okay, so that's the polyeleos there. Sometimes we read Psalm 118, for instance, on Holy Saturday Matins, and on Sunday they are replaced by what we call the Evlogitaria, and or other specific hymns related with certain feasts. For instance, for the services of the Mother of God, we're going to read Psalm 44. We're going to sing Psalm 44, which is called A Good Word. At the beginning of Lent, there is a special Poliele was sung in the third mode mostly. There is a Psalm 136 by the river of Babylon. And on Sundays, we have the resurrectional Evlogitaria. Okay? And so those are the different parts of the end of the reading of the Kathismata, which includes Kathisma 1 and 2 and other psalms or selected verses from psalms related to the various feast days. All right, what do we have after that? After that, we have the reading, the preparation for the reading of the gospel, right? And what follows immediately after that. We have first the antiphons. What are the antiphons? This is, for instance, an excerpt from the festal antiphons on fourth mode. From my youth, many passions have fought against me. They are fragments for the Psalm of Ascent, 119 to 134, which were sung by the pilgrims as they were going up to the temple in Jerusalem. And we, of course, in a more symbolical way, we are ascending on these psalms as we go to the pinnacle of the Matins, which is the proclamation of the resurrection gospel and the hymns of the resurrection. Every Matin service, we are reading one of the 11 Gospels of Resurrection, which are basically pretty much all the accounts from the four Gospels that have to do with the resurrection of Christ, which were divided in 11 parts that are read successively in the Sundays following Pascha. After the antiphons, we are singing a prokimenon, just as in Vespers. A prokimenon means something that precedes another thing. And they are basically responsorial verses from Psalms that introduce a scripture reading or emphasize a particular theme. In our case, the gospel of the resurrection. An interesting thing is that the gospel of the resurrection on Sunday is read from the altar and is always read from, in the Greek tradition, from the south side of the altar. Why? Because of this icon. As the myrrh-bearer woman went to see Christ at the tomb, they saw the tomb empty, and they saw inside a young man who proclaimed to them, why are you seeking the one who is alive among the dead? Right? So he proclaimed the resurrection from the side of the tomb there, and in the symbolics of the theology of the space of the Orthodox Church, the altar becomes the tomb, right? So the priest represents the angel who proclaims the gospel of resurrection from the tomb there. On feast days, however, since we don't have that resurrectional reference, we are going to read the gospel from the holy doors. On Sundays, the priest comes out and brings the gospel out for people to venerate, which again is not happening in feast days because again of the missing of the resurrection. After this, we read a prayer that is intoned by the deacon, having beheld the holy resurrection of Christ, and then during that we have the Sunday veneration, as I mentioned. After during the veneration, we are chanting on Sundays. On Sundays, we chant Psalm 50 because you have a lot of people who come and venerate, while on feast day we just read because there is no veneration, and there are some troparia that are fixed on Sundays related to the resurrection, or for feast days they are changed and they relate with something that has to do with the theology of the feast day or the saint that is celebrated that day. After this, the deacon is going to intone the prayer, "O God, save your people and bless your inheritance," which is the same as the Liti service as we discussed at Vespers, and basically is an intercession for all the saints. So we got through the Matins ordinary and God is the Lord, Kathismata, and the reading of the gospel. And after that comes the canons and everything that used to represent the biggest and the longest part of the Orthodox service, which contain 9 odes. Actually, only 8 of them are done in current practice, but each one of them multiplied by 14 stanzas. You can imagine there was a lot of stanzas there with the refrain in between them and small litanies and other things. So let's go a little bit through that and understand what is going on here. Okay. Actually, I think that this we're going to discuss about next time. So yeah, the order of the canons, we're going to discuss about that next time. So that was the lesson for today. I apologize for not recording this live during the class. We're missing the question that we had at that time, but I think that one of the main questions that we had at that point was, how do we get familiar with so much material? And I think that there are 2 ways of doing it. First of all, do not panic. You don't have to remember all that. You can just come to the service and enjoy it. And if you're lost, say the Jesus prayer, right? Another thing you can do, you can follow on DCS. We're trying to follow the text from DCS, but sometimes we use music that is better composed, that may be on other text. Sometimes we choose the best translation of everything. As you know, translation into English is still in the works. Orthodox in here is only about 100 years old, maybe a little more, but it's still in its infancy if you compare to 2,000 years of Christianity. And so we have to be patient with that. Something that I always recommend is to read the services in advance. Go on DCS and try to have scan through the service, read some of the most important prayers and hymns that are related to the feast there, so you can understand what this feast is all about. A lot of the hymnography contains the theology of the feast or of the resurrection, even of the weekday, because as you remember, each day we celebrate another saint. Monday, the holy the bodiless powers. On Tuesday, St. John the Baptist. Wednesday, the betrayal of Judah and the Holy Cross. Thursday, the apostles and St. Nicholas. Friday, the cross. Saturday, the dead, day of the dead. And on Sunday is the resurrection. So each day we have some specific hymns and specific theology that you can read in the Orthodox services that you participate. So read the services before, and then allow yourself as you come in to try to figure out, okay, where I am. Are they reading now? It's a lot of psalms, a lot of text. Okay, that's probably the 6 psalms there. Are they start thinking something lively? That may be at the beginning with God is the Lord. If you hear God is the Lord, you're at the beginning of Orthodox. But if you start hearing a lot of hymns with a refrain that is repeated, you may be during the canons. Obviously, you'll recognize the reading of the gospel, and you'll follow everybody to venerate there, and you will see about the rest of them there. So do not panic. Just come there to enjoy the service there. But if you come prepared, I always think that you're gonna get more from the service than if you just come and try to figure it out on the spot and you're distracted by the electronics, or even if you have a printed thing, it's going to be distracting, I think. So until next time, we finish with this prayer. Guard them at all times this evening and the coming night from every enemy, from all demonic activity against them, from unprofitable reflections and from wicked thoughts. Thank you so much, and may God bless you. Tăceți, bă, din gură că înregistrez și eu ceva. N-am văzut așa ceva. Vorbiți așa de tare. So until next time, I wish you a good day.